Good day, folks, and welcome to another edition of Lumberjack Logic. I'm your host, Neil Johnson, and I have put together the best of the mainstream media's meltdown. And the meltdown was nuclear of the Supreme Court's 9-0 decision over the ballot case involving the Colorado Supreme Court, which tells you just how bad the Colorado Supreme Court is in all reality. First, they will gaslight you, then we will get into the other clips. So it starts with Tim Walz saying, "This was never the plan. Trump will be denied his second term at the ballot box. Voters will protect their freedom to start a family using reproductive health care like IVF. They'll vote to keep books in their classrooms, and they'll vote to keep the government out of their bedroom." That's right, folks, because you need more kiddie porn in your schools. But if they weren't talking on Twitter, they were taken to the airwaves.
Clearly, this is a win for Trump. He can stay on all of the ballots across the country. This is something, if you talk to Democrats, if you talk to Biden campaign officials, Biden allies, and many Democrats, if not most Democrats, they actually did not want the outcome of Trump getting kicked off the ballot.
The gaslighting is off the hook at this point, because do they honestly think that they spent tens of millions of dollars, tried cases in 22 states to just face Trump on election day, and then Democrat donors funded Nikki Haley's super PACs? Come on, they never wanted to face Donald Trump. Keith Olbermann went on after this decision and said the Supreme Court has betrayed democracy. Its members, including Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor, have proved themselves inept at reading comprehension, and collectively, the court has shown itself to be corrupt and illegitimate. It must be dissolved. Yes, because that's how you defend democracy, people, is getting rid of the institutions of democracy. He further went on to say, F you, Sonny Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Liberal women are effing useless. This guy is unhinged right now. But he wasn't the only one.
Supreme Court has just ruled unanimously that Colorado courts cannot keep you-know-who off the state's ballot.
Whoopi's so upset she can't even say his name.
I had far too much hope that the court would be united in this and not overstep in favor of Donald Trump. And I think what we saw was a court where justices that behaved in a partisan manner.
It didn't surprise me. I'd started to gain faith, as Sonny would tell us, like, this is going to get him. And I was like,
This is going to get him. But remember, they wanted to face Trump. We were told that at the beginning.
They ruled on this question. They did not rule on whether he is an insurrectionist.
No.
They did not rule on whether he helped lead an insurrection and promote an insurrection. Those are two very separate questions.
I don't know what's wrong with these people. You still have to understand that Trump has never been convicted of insurrection, and Jack Smith abandoned that. Why do they keep forgetting this? Do they have amnesia, or do they just not want to admit it? But it gets worse, because right now she's going to Fani Willis and trying to draw a comparison.
Look, we have spent days in the last few weeks watching Fani Willis be on a witness stand and going through the fact that she was having an affair with a guy she hired to prosecute this case. It's a conflict of interest case. It bothers me tremendously that we have now had this case where Clarence Thomas has sat there, and we have another case, the immunity case, where Clarence Thomas apparently plans to sit there, despite the fact that, in my view, and I think in a lot of Americans' view, he has a conflict of interest, because if Fani Willis sleeping with that guy you think was a conflict of interest, what do you think of Clarence Thomas being married to a woman who was actually trying to overturn the elections?
They really cannot stand Clarence Thomas. I think it's because he's a black guy who's also a conservative. But it's not only black guys who are conservatives they're coming after. Now they're coming after black women who are liberals because they don't agree with them. This out of the Atlantic. We're seeing that now Ketanji Brown Jackson has a problem with white supremacy. But let's get back to The View.
Now, the thing that bothers me about this, and I know it's probably the right decision, but I don't like that we've normalized this man.
Yeah.
It has really irritated the poo out of me.
Yeah.
That we have normalized him and his bad behavior.
This is really fascinating coming from a party that continues to try to normalize Bill Clinton and Joe Biden when Joe Biden was showering with Ashley, apparently, and liberal pundits can't seem to tell the difference between insurrection and erection.
Explanation was not they didn't like Donald Trump. They said he participated in an erection And I have to, an insurrection, and I have to say I got up at 5 this morning to do Casey Hunt's show, and I'm exhausted. So,
look, if Joe Biden had one count against him, not 91, he could not be the Democratic presidential candidate. If Joe Biden had committed sexual assault and we had heard him, he could not be running for president. If Joe Biden had been found liable for sexual assault to the tune of $83 million, he could not be running for president.
I think the real question here is, why hasn't Joe Biden been found liable? If we can find Trump liable from a gal who can't even remember the year and appears to be a made-up event out of an episode of Law and Order, then why hasn't Joe Biden been tried when we've got the diary of Ashley Biden? Instead, they go after James O'Keefe, and by going after him, confirm that the diary was actually real. Yet no charges are brought against this guy. We know something is stinking out there. And then when the Supreme Court finally comes out with a ruling that's 9-0 in favor of Donald Trump, they're having a freak fest.
Well, like that, yeah. And so this thing where he has now once again been given a rubber to put on and walk through the pool. Yes, that's, you heard me.
But what?
Their minds are always in the gutter, people. And now we go on to some legal analyst on CNN who still is clinging that Donald Trump is an insurrectionist.
But there's a second extremely important unanimous aspect of this opinion that's not being noticed, Becky. They did not explicitly deny the lower court findings that Donald Trump was an insurrectionist. Multiple fact finders have reached that conclusion. Indeed, if you look at the evidence, the January 6th committee, Colorado, Maine, Illinois have all found that, and that was not expressly overturned. And indeed, the 3 Democratic justices pointed to it in their concurrence. So in a sense, they have left the question open for the criminal authorities and for the American people what to do about Donald Trump's allegedly criminal conduct.
Funny the examples he uses there with Colorado, Illinois, and then also Maine. Maine was Shenna Bellows, the Secretary of State, who just made official kind of court-looking documents to try and say she could do what she couldn't do. Then we had a municipal court judge in Illinois who's deciding traffic cases who thinks she can rule on such important matters. And then when you go to Colorado, you've got a Supreme Court that's so bad that the United States Supreme Court actually comes out with a unanimous decision, and the left is still hanging that we've got Donald Trump. He's an insurrectionist.
One of the curious aspects of this decision is that they waited until the day before Super Tuesday to drop it. It puts the wind in Donald Trump's sails. He's already said it's a win. We'll hear a lot more from him. Why do that in the 24 hours before Super Tuesday, in the media cycle around Super Tuesday? I would not have done that. Feels too political.
But now we get to hear directly from the lady herself. That's right, Jenna Griswold, who can't stand oath-breaking insurrectionists, and we should be able to get them off the ballot. This is the lady who can't oversee a free and fair election in the state of Colorado.
My larger reaction is disappointment. I do believe that states should be able, under our Constitution, to bar oath-breaking insurrectionists. And ultimately, this decision leaves open the door for Congress to act, to pass authorizing legislation. But we know that Congress is a nearly non-functioning body. So ultimately, it will be up to the American voters to save our democracy in November.
This was a unanimous decision, and
But don't expect Democrats to give up, because now that they've heard that Congress has to act, that's what Jamie Raskin wants to do.
I am working with a number of my colleagues, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Eric Swalwell, to revive legislation that we had to set up a process by which we could determine that someone who committed insurrection is disqualified by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And the House of Representatives already impeached Donald Trump for participating in insurrection by inciting it. So the House has already pronounced upon that.
That's right, people. Nancy Pelosi's sham J6 committee that was headed up by Benny Thompson, a real self-avowed insurrectionist. That's who decides whether Donald Trump is an insurrectionist. These people are unbelievable. This is the same committee that hid half of the information, 2 terabytes of information, before the Republicans took over Congress.
Look, unfortunately for America, the court isn't necessarily wrong that this is the way the framers wanted it to be. They wanted Congress, the people who are closest to their constituents, to be able to make the rules and the laws. That doesn't change the fact that because of gerrymandering in the House and all kinds of other issues, they're not doing their job on a lot of these big issues.
Yeah. I agree. It's very unlikely, close to impossible that Congress will take action. But this is now a fair question that Manu Raju, Melanese and Ona should be asking members of Congress. Are you willing to pass legislation that would give us rules for how this works? It could only be in the future, by the way.
This next clip might be my favorite simply because Jen Psaki introduces him as a conservative attorney. I find it funny that they always pull conservative attorneys who work for organizations like The Atlantic, which is a far left-wing rag. These aren't real conservatives.
Conservative attorney George Conway. He is a contributor to The Atlantic and co-host of the podcast George Conway Explains It All. So I want to dig into all of that, the timing of the Supreme Court, because a lot of us can't figure that out. But we were just talking about the ruling today, and you tweeted today, it doesn't even profess to be interpreting the text.
It doesn't. And I think that's, Professor Eiffel said that there was a lot of overreach in the majority opinion. I think the problem here is that all 9 justices underreached. They simply decided that they weren't going to apply the Constitution the way you normally apply it, which is you read the text and you try to figure out what it means in the context of the history, and you apply it. And the plain text of the constitutional provision here says that Donald Trump is disqualified.
You can really tell a good conservative when they not only show up on MSNBC, but also CNN.
And the other argument, which was that he did not engage in an insurrection. And the latter, I think, is the most important takeaway from this, notwithstanding Donald Trump declaring victory. He remains an adjudicated insurrectionist after this opinion, because the Supreme Court did not in any way undercut or contradict or suggest in any way there was any infirmity in the factual findings made by the lower courts.
They continue to peddle the lie that Donald Trump has somehow been convicted of insurrection, and he never has been. In fact, Jack Smith had to drop that. Do you honestly believe that if Jack Smith thought he could get the insurrection charge to stick, he wouldn't have gone with it? He 100% would have gone with it, but he couldn't. And even he could admit that. So he couldn't try it out in a court, so he had to drop that charge. But I'm going to leave you with the best clip, the best meltdown you will see on this whole issue, and that's Rachel Maddow. Before I do, want to tell you, go check out my sponsor, MyPillow, mypillow.com, promo code Lumberjack to get big savings. These percale sheets right now, only $39.98 for king sets. That's almost Walmart prices. That's on some of the best sheets, 140 plus thread count. These are phenomenal sheets for a great deal, and it's only available to the listeners of this show. Mike came on, did an interview, and put this deal together just for the people who use promo code Lumberjack. And not only that, you get free shipping. But if you're new, subscribe and smash that like on the way out. Check it out.
But I will just leave you with this. There's no magic spell. There's no solution that is going to come, say, from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did the favor of reminding us all of that today when they ruled that Trump will stay on the ballot all over the country. They gave us that reminder today after last week. They made sure we knew it in the first place when they somewhat inexplicably took action to delay all the Trump criminal trials except the one they couldn't stop until after the election. There's no magic wand coming to stop this thing. There's no, magic beans that you can grow here that make some beanstalk take us away from all of this. There's only one way out of this. Pick one. The Democratic Party has picked its nominee. Yes, it's an old guy who is doing practical, normal, and popular things as president and who has a lot to show for it, particularly in terms of how well things are going economically since he has been at the helm. The Republican Party is pretty obviously picking their guy as well, also an old guy who, for example, cannot say the word Venezuela and who has no idea who is the current president of the United States, currently riding high on his party's abortion bans and measles-curious virological denialist free associating. He's trying to warm the American people up to the idea of just a little bit of dictatorship from him. And he's getting us ready to start building camps to hold millions, because his advisors say the deportations start at noon on day one. The courts are not going to help. The law will be a sidebar to the main decision. You will make this decision. The only way this decision will be made is by you picking one, by you volunteering and donating and campaigning and deciding it matters enough to you to not only vote, but to help your candidate try to win. The Republican Party really, really is amazing right now. But the only thing that will stop them is Democrats winning instead. Period. Full stop. Thank you, United States Supreme Court, for the clarification.